On a chilly morning in Paris, more than 200,000 demonstrators filled the boulevards, chanting and waving banners under a gray sky. Their message was clear: block everything. This massive show of discontent came just days after Gabriel Attal, France's new prime minister, took office. For Attal, it was supposed to be a moment to showcase continuity and renewal in the government's agenda. Instead, the streets had other ideas. His very first test as prime minister would not be in the halls of parliament, but in the roar of protesters echoing down the Rue de Rivoli. At the heart of the demonstration was anger over proposed reforms, specifically changes to labor laws that critics say would erode worker protections and favor employers. France's trade unions, long a powerful force in French public life, called the protest under the slogan "Block Everything," urging their members and allies to disrupt daily life through marches, strikes, and civil disobedience. The numbers matched the rhetoric. From Marseille to Lille, Nantes to Lyon, crowds gathered in city centers, shutting down major arteries, occupying roundabouts, and setting up pickets at train stations. Public transportation slowed to a crawl. Bus depots were sealed off, metro entrances filled with union members. Commuters found themselves stranded while teachers, public workers, and even some private sector employees joined the walkout. For Prime Minister Attal, still fresh to the public stage, the timing could hardly be worse. Only recently appointed after the resignation of Elizabeth Borne, he inherited not just the traditional challenges of French governance, managing inflation, overseeing national security, and maintaining the delicate balance between reform and public acceptance, but now, this sudden groundswell of opposition. To understand how France arrived at this crisis, it's necessary to look back. French presidents and prime ministers have often faced fierce street resistance to reform. Pension overhauls, loosening of labor codes, and public sector cuts are perennial flashpoints in a country where the right to protest is as much a part of national culture as the baguette or the cinema. Unions, though diminished in membership compared to decades past, can still paralyze large swathes of the economy for days or even weeks when roused. This new movement, organized under the banner "Block Everything," taps into a deeper well of discontent. Inflation has eroded real wages despite government measures to soften the blow. Worries about job security, especially for younger and older employees, remain acute. Attal's government argues that loosening some restrictions could make it easier for companies to hire, kickstart economic growth, and bring unemployment down. Critics counter that such reforms risk turning stable jobs into precarious ones, eroding cherished social protections. As the protests surged, Attal addressed the nation. In a televised speech from Matignon, he acknowledged the legitimate anxieties and frustrations driving people into the streets, but urged for patience and dialogue, promising that the reforms would come with safeguards for those most vulnerable. His words, however, struggled to cut through the latest images dominating news bulletins: police lines in Place de la République, barricades smoldering, union leaders leading chants outside the National Assembly. International observers watched closely. France is Europe's second-largest economy, and as a founding member of the European Union, its domestic stability carries outsized weight continental-wide. Any hint of sustained unrest can roil financial markets and unsettle neighbors already jittery from a succession of political shocks across the continent. In the hours that followed, the government's response was calibrated. Police maintained a visible but largely restrained presence, focusing on keeping transportation arteries open and preventing violence. Still, episodes of confrontation flared up. Some business owners voiced frustration at lost revenue, while student groups threatened the occupation of universities next if their demands were not heard. The question looming over the Élysée is whether this protest marks a new wave of resistance or will dissipate as previous movements sometimes have, with symbolic marches but few concrete results. Attal's political future may hinge on the answer. If he can convince unions and the broader public of the necessity and fairness of reforms, France could move forward, cautiously, along a new economic path. If not, the disruptions could harden into a perpetual standoff, reminiscent of the Yellow Vest movement or the Great Strikes of earlier decades. By nightfall, as crowds thinned but passions remained high, one thing was clear. The battle lines in French politics were redrawn not by a ballot box, but by 200,000 voices determined to block everything until their demands are heard. Night returned to Paris, but the crisis for France's new prime minister had only just begun.